This week, we welcome co-host of Gutfeld, comedian and author, Timpf.
I think usually the people who are upset about these things are the people who haven't gone through it yet. So they're like not mad at me for calling my mom my dead mom. They're just mad that they had to think about dead moms for a second.
Right.
And if that's what it is, then just say that, just be like, yeah, ooch, I don't like to think about my mom dying. So much better than like, don't say that, the way you're handling your own grief, that's wrong. Because you're just a jerk. Like, you're seriously just such a jerk. And for me, that's my whole chapter. And the last chapter is called, Comedy is My Religion.
Yeah.
Because
I love that.
It provides a lot of the same things, like healing physically, even, the chemicals that get released in your brain can be healing, like good for your immunity physically, emotionally healing. It can provide meaning to otherwise completely traumatic experiences. I mean, all the stuff that I went through, I was able to also provide meaning to me by, writing this book and creating from it.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you are welcome. You know the drill. Please subscribe, rate, comment, share, reach out, tell your friends, send smoke signals, whatever. We love your feedback and we want to hear from you. If you like our work and want to support us, the best way to do that is join Phetasy.com. You'll get access to behind-the-scenes content, outtakes, discounts on merch, and the ability to submit questions for some of our upcoming guests. Support your favorite scrappy little internet heroes at Phetasy.com. All right. I'm with Timpf, everyone. Welcome to Walk-Ins Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Thanks for being here. I was reading your book. I'm like, this is like a sister from another mister.
Thank you. I can tell that you read it because it was a great thing that I could always tell people actually read it or if they were pretending to read it based on whether or not they told me like, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
You're like, oh, she actually read the book.
Yeah.
I just I guess I'm not that surprised at how much you've gone through, but it's always surprising to hear it in someone's own words. And I think you do a great job with this book of writing in your voice. I can hear you. It sounds like I'm sitting with you, knowing you as well as I do, which is not that well, but clearly, obviously not as well as the people who are next to you and all of these horrific things in your life know you, but it just sounds like you. So I think that's a talent to be able to write in that voice that is yours.
Yeah, honestly, I think writing is probably the thing that I'm best at. I mean, that's how I started and, then the TV thing sort of happened, but that's my favorite thing is that, it does, even my husband was like, you just write like it sounds like you. That's so great. And, it's funny because there obviously could not have been a ghostwriter who wrote this book because it very much is. But writing, I love writing it. It was healing to write it. It was scary to have it actually be published because of how vulnerable it is and how detailed I get into some of the things that I've been through over the past, 12 years of my life.
What's the process for writing a book like that for you?
Well, I got the idea for the book after my first shitbag surgery. So I'd been wanting to write a book for a while because I like to write and, I have this platform and that seemed like the logical next step, but I didn't really have any ideas for what to write about and like everything was wrong or didn't work. But I was talking to my dad after I had that emergency ostomy surgery that encompasses chapter 5.
Yes.
And, my dad was like, Kat, and at the time my age, I was 32. He's like, you're 32 years old, but what have you not been through? And I kind of said, I was like doped up on Oxy, but I said, well, Dad, everything you go through, you're automatically building a connection with everyone else who's been through it too. And I was right. But I also, the more I thought about it, I realized but what's the use if we can't talk about it? Right. And I think that unfortunately we're getting more and more to the place where, on both sides, both of the major parties even have their sacred cows, right? Or things that you're supposed to not talk about in a candid way. But I think that so much of the free speech discussion focuses on, I can say whatever I want, no matter how offensive it is, and fuck you. And although that's true, I think that, I agree with that too, but it ignores the way that it can kind of bring us together too, because if we can fully express ourselves, that's our best hope of ever being, or our only hope really of ever being able to understand each other fully too.
Yeah. And I think so many of the things that plague people are above politics, like what
Yeah.
you talk about in your book and going through health emergencies, losing loved ones, I was putting on my mascara getting ready for this interview thinking, and it's just a weird thought, but I know you can probably relate to this because you've had a crazy fucked up life too, where I'm like, "Oh, I hope I don't get one of those calls today." Where your
Yeah.
life changes in a minute, not for the better. And I think those are the things that bind us and connect us. And as the political fray starts to expose just like all the division and people not being able to talk to each other, they lose that ability to connect on the more basic things that you are writing about in your book.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why, my book is, there's like one chapter maybe that's political, and
Mm,
there is one, but it hits both sides, right? And it is more about, the human stuff. And I think that now people are so divided that you're so quick to just write off another person because maybe you disagree on one issue. And then you might be missing out on a connection you could have with them on something else. Like maybe your parents had the same illness, or maybe, you've struggled with a similar mental health issue or something like that. And that's why I think, everything has to be okay to joke about, and not just for connection, but also I found humor to be super healing.
yeah.
When I all the fucked up shit that I went through, I was joking about it during. I know they say comedy is tragedy plus time, but for me, it's like even in the shitbag chapter, a lot of those jokes were things I was like writing in text messages while I was in the
Yeah.
hospital, or saying, during my mom's funeral, like on the home from her wake, joking around with my siblings. And it's not because the stuff wasn't sad that it's because it was sad that I had to joke about it. People get it so backwards, like, oh, that's not funny. You can't joke about it. I think the more serious and grave something is, the more you need to be able to joke about it, because if you say, oh, you can't joke about that, then you're making it untouchable, which makes it even more powerful than it already is.
Yeah, that's from my experience. I know that I've done threads on Twitter about stuff when people have come after comedians for being able to joke about this or that, and I don't think anybody should be allowed to be like the arbiter of A, what's funny and what's not funny, and B, who gets to laugh at what. You take away if you say somebody can't joke about rape, for example, well, in my instance, that was took a lot of the power away from a situation where I felt very powerless.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people feel that way about their own trauma. I wrote about, actually, in one of my chapters, the Safe Spaces Aren't Real chapter, about this, how strict it is to be able to be a comedian that performs on college campuses. And there was this panel that Vice did an interview with this panel at this school, and they're saying, well, no, never anyone who made jokes about rape. And the question was asked, what that was their person's own rape? They've been raped
Right.
themselves. They're like, probably still no. And it's like, okay, but you see yourself as being the compassionate one in that situation. That's crazy to me. I'm a sensitive person. I know everybody says, facts don't care about your feelings, and that's totally true. But also sometimes your feelings don't care about your facts. Like
Yeah.
I've been in some like horrible relationships with these guys who are treating me awful, but it's like, but I love him. Like I knew that, but I'm like, but I love him, but I'm an idiot. That's because I'm, listening to my feelings. Pro speech includes speech about feelings. It's great to be sensitive. It's great to share how you feel. The difference is when you expect the world to revolve around those feelings. That's not sensitivity. That's being completely self-obsessed and selfish, and just demanding that, like, this makes me upset, therefore you have to
Right.
completely revolve your entire life around me and my feelings.
Yeah, and it doesn't build resilience. So
Mm-mm.
demanding that the world change around you is a like you said very self-obsessed and ridiculous, but it's
Yeah.
also why should you not have to learn how to cope with anything? What coping mechanisms are you learning if the world is just bubble wrapping you? It doesn't and it doesn't even work that way. Like reality remains undefeated. So no matter how many safe spaces you might create, you're still going to bump up against tragedy, trauma, death, as you mentioned in your book. There's so many things that could happen that are going to catch you off guard. And it's better to just be able to handle those things than to act like every single thing that makes you uncomfortable in the world has to cease to exist or go away.
Yeah, the research is pretty clear on that too, that, trigger warnings, for example, the best case scenario is that they make no difference, but actually there's research showing that actually makes things worse for trauma survivors because of that exact thing that you just mentioned. And also, a safe space is literally impossible because we're all individuals, so maybe a safe space for you would be somewhere where you could joke around about rape, but maybe another person's safe space might be where they didn't have to hear a joke about that. So, like, there's not one space where you'd be like, oh, this is a safe space for everyone. That's just not possible because we're all different people. Everybody has their own things that trigger them. Everybody has their own trauma. Everyone has their own life experience. Everyone has their own way that they deal with that. So there's never going to be any room in any situation where you can be like, okay, I go into this room and I can be guaranteed that I'm not going to get upset. That's just not how humans are.
Yeah. I just it's so curious to me how the culture has devolved into this very strange place. And I think you occupy just being of the millennials and of that time period, but yet you're kind of a voice who speaks out against it. So you're a refreshing voice of your generation instead of somebody who's demanding everybody stop joking and get safe spaces.
Yeah, and I love that you said devolve because I don't get how this whole, like the words are violence thing. I mean, I've been reporting on this stuff for years. I mean, I worked at Campus Reform, I worked at National Review, and it was like a refrain on college campuses, and now it's in, the outside world outside of college. But, words are violence is ridiculous because, I mean, you're saying if words are violence, then violence is an acceptable response to violence, or acceptable response to violence. And honestly, like that's what we did for most of human history.
Right.
Like cavemen did that, like the old west, someone says something bad about your mama and you like have a shootout. Like that's not progressive to think that way. That's
Right.
actually going backwards in time.
Yeah.
So I don't understand how people don't see that. I mean, now that we've become more modern, we're like, okay, we use words to respond to words. They're actually wanting to go backwards in history and they see themselves as progressive, but that's just objectively not true.
Yeah, there was a lot of that talk around, I think around the protests during 2020, and I had some joke on Twitter where I'm like, "Words are violence," the protester said as he smashed a brick in your face,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you guys.
And I'm sure, yeah. And I think also intention is the most important. Another dumb thing that's come out of, the younger generations like mine and even Gen Z is the idea that intention doesn't matter. So if
Mm,
someone's offended, that's all that matters. And that's just the dumbest thing because of course it matters. Like it matters when you kill somebody. So, why does it not matter in terms of speaking? I mean, if someone's attempting to, maybe lighten up a situation or make people laugh with humor, how can that not be different than someone who's like saying racist things because they are a racist?
yeah.
I mean, obviously it matters. And I mean, it matters in terms of, not canceling people who don't deserve to be canceled, but also it kind of minimizes any examples of people who really, I mean, there's like going to be nothing reserved for people who actually are pieces of shit
Yeah.
because someone who makes an errant comment is already treated that way in a lot of instances.
Yeah, and I think it does water down people's sensitivity to those words when those
Hmm.
words mean nothing. If you're suddenly saying, "Well, intent doesn't matter," and it doesn't matter if you are actually a racist, you might be a secret, unconsciously biased racist, and now and you don't even know it, and you're not aware of it, and everybody's all these horrible words. When I grew up, racist was like the worst thing you could be called.
Yeah.
Transphobic wasn't really even a thing, but now that's
Yeah.
thrown around very loosely, and as you do that, those words lose their meaning and their gravity completely, and people stop. I feel like it gives a pass to the people who are actually those things, as you said. It just lets them kind of fly under the radar.
Yeah, and it also doesn't help anyone understand each other better. I mean, because yeah, now it's all transphobia now. Like that's like the thing that people are on the lookout for. And I write about this too in my book. I caught myself the first time I had to talk about the Leah Thomas thing. I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God. I'm gonna, what if I say something bad and this, and then I was like, I'd rather just talk about the war in Ukraine. And then I kind of caught myself. I was like, so I'm thinking that talking about like a literal, like bloody, murderous war is more comfortable for me than talking about a women's college swimming competition. Then there's probably something wrong with the way we treat this subject.
Yeah.
And if you're a trans rights activist and that's your number one issue and that's your whole life's work, you shouldn't want that either, because having questions about what, oh, I don't know if someone who goes through male puberty might have different advantages, and the science says this, and pointing those sorts of things out is not the same as being a transphobe. And if you call anybody who asks that kind of question or has that concern a transphobe, then you're turning those people completely off, and maybe even making people afraid to ask any sort of question in the first place.
Yeah. Yep. It just shuts down discussion completely. People just become
Hmm.
too afraid to even walk. It's like I said lately in the culture, I just feel like everyone's walking on eggshells all the time. Not everywhere. I will say it is refreshing being in Texas.
Yeah.
I've had
Oh
already
man.
so many experiences where I'm like, normal people. Like this woman was backing out of the driveway in this awesome truck, and her kids were running around the yard, and her husband was watching the kids on the front yard, and he's like, careful, female drivers. And we just all clearly he's not like, she's a badass woman with a truck. He doesn't
Yeah.
obviously. It was just refreshing and funny that we could all just laugh at that joke.
Yeah, here, like in New York, if somebody made that joke, there would be like a 2,000 word think piece on it, like the next day. And the person who made the comment, like they'd have to repossess that truck because everybody would get fired.
It's
I
like the
mean, it's like,
casual misogyny of
yeah, it's like, and it's just again, like it minimizes experience. Like every woman has experienced like actual sexism, actual harassment, like and with people who actually have archaic views, and that's not the same thing as someone making a joke like that. In terms of everything, we really, I think that it can be scary, but I think we all really have to really embrace it. And at this point, it's like I really don't give a shit. I just say whatever it is I really think and whatever it is I really feel. And if it pisses people off, at least it'll be like, okay, I didn't waste this platform that I have by saying something I don't believe or not saying something. Because even if let's say there's a joke that does offend you or you don't like it, then you can say like, oh, I didn't like that. That's a lot different than saying I didn't like that, therefore you don't deserve to be employed. Because people watch the reactions of other people, and
Mhm.
if people start reacting in this extreme way, then it's going to make, maybe someone else might not make a different joke that might be one that you do like or that you might even need about something that you go through in your own life. And I write about in the book too these studies that have shown that on like many issues there's massive gaps, across various demographics of what people actually believe and what people say they believe. So we've actually like created this culture that it's very not in line with what most people think in terms of what is actually acceptable versus not acceptable.
Right. When you were writing this book, how long did it take you, and how did it's a nice mix of social commentary and personal anecdotes and research, even as you mentioned, there's a lot. How long did it take you to write, and how did you deal with writing the more personal kind of hard parts that are where you say you were really vulnerable?
Yeah, I mean, the first two chapters I wrote actually were the shitbag chapter and the death chapter. Those were like for my proposal. So those, were obviously super emotional to write. And then after that, I wrote it in 4 months. I mean, I had an outline, but I kind of found that I would just come up with ideas for new chapters kind of as things went along. And, I try to do a chapter a week. So I wrote it in 4 months, actually, which was really fast. And then there
Yeah.
were edits. The hardest thing I found was recording the audiobook
Mhm.
because I did it in just a couple days, right? And it was hard for a few reasons. First of all, by that time it's too late to change anything. So it's like way too late. And then also just on the basic level, the shitbag chapter in particular, it's, very detailed and very graphic. And it was a little awkward to read that just like in front of the audio engineer that I just met like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Like just like being like, and, blood gushing out of my ass and like, this and that. I was covered in, shit bandages, like, shit soaked bandages, all this stuff. And like, sorry. And then also just going down the line of like from Boston market cashier to now, like everything I've been through, it made me a little emotional. Like how, like, wow, like I looked at my, I mean, I dedicated my book to my cat. Well, I said to Cheens, Timpf, and Joan Rivers, neither of whom can read this. Cheens is my cat. After the book started selling really well and the cats, I went home and I saw Cheens and I was just like, we did it. And like, I just started sobbing. It was like such an emotional moment because he's been with me through all of it.
Yeah.
Because you really are just like revisiting trauma.
No, I get it.
And you think I had two main concerns, right? Like, okay, oh my God, people are going to actually read this. They're going to actually know this about me. And then I was like, but the other instance would be worse, that nobody reads it. And I put all of that out there and nobody cared.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's
those,
terrifying.
it was scary either way. I mean, even Guy Benson, who obviously works here, he's a good friend of mine. He read the book and he interviewed me about it. And he was like, there was times when I read it and I was like, she's really putting that out there. And I'm like, yeah, because I really, when I'm going to write this book, which I wanted to be radically pro comedy and, radically pro speech, I'm not just going to talk the talk, that's why I didn't want to just do, talk about the culture. I wanted to kind of talk about some of my own stuff. I mean, my stuff that I'm embarrassed by and kind of, show and just don't tell. Like, okay, you can't ever tell me that having this near death experience that was also a disgusting one and then also disgusting and dangerous again on the reversal of it. You can't tell me that that's not a very serious topic. You can't tell me that the untimely death of my mother is not a very serious topic. You can't tell me that my abusive relationship's not a serious topic. So, but you're watching me joke about that.
Right.
And so I really do mean you can joke about everything. And I've also been very consistent in defending, as you have been, every comedian ever who's, even if their joke is something I'm like, I didn't like that. It's like, but they're a comedian. And so much of comedy is swinging and missing.
Yeah.
And so much of it is also, especially with stand-up or sometimes, anything that's live, it's like you don't really know if a joke's going to work until you try it. And you're going to miss. And you can't make people too afraid to try.
Yeah, exactly. I was just talking about this in an interview I did for about Rogan's new mothership, but also I was thinking about something that I was quoting Chris Rock, I believe. He said something in an interview I read that really struck me about comedy, where it's the only art form that you have to fail publicly in order to get better. You can't
Yeah.
just go hide in a room and practice your chords. You can't go paint
No.
your paintings in your garage. You have to get up in front of people and try the material and fail. And that's the only way you're going to get better at it. And it's just brutal. It's the most. And so in that process, and this is what I was talking to the Free Press about, in that process, there's so much not funny stuff. There's so, and I've seen the greats try and work material out, and then you see their special and you're like, ooh, I remember when that was rough. Like people walking out of like Bill Burr's set because they did, as he's trying to work some of these things out. And if they had had a recording of that set, it would have been something that was very different from where he actually got to with that joke when he finally found his way through. You can't always, the only way through that process is through it. You can't cheat it.
You can't. No, absolutely. Like you can try something as you think it's funny and then you have no idea and then people get so mad. But that's just, you just like you said, you have to be able to swing and miss. It's like, I really hate when people say, I don't mind offensive jokes as long as they're funny. It's like, okay, but the only way to know if it's funny or not is to try it. Like you don't understand how this works at all if you're making that comment. And you think that you're being like, super, I'm cool with it. I get it. There's no topic that's untouchable in comedy, but you have to be funny. You really don't know if it's funny until you try it. I mean, there's been things that I thought were going to be so good and they were not. And I'm like, whoops. But nowadays it's not, and by the way, that as, any comedian, and I haven't really done stand up in a while. I've started doing, live shows where it's kind of stand up, kind of not. It's more like a one woman show, but there's definitely some stand up involved. But you already feel so bad when that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's embarrassing. It's like, ouch, But then to be like, okay, therefore now you're done forever. It's really not an exaggeration to say there would be no comedians left because that's part of the process. There just really wouldn't be any comedians left. Either that or you'd have to, already have total fuck you money to even want to try it. So then you're like gatekeeping comedy to only like the most rich people in the world. And it's again, this is not a compassionate view. It reflects a complete misunderstanding. I mean, for me, it's like I opened my book with this. I had that really rough month, 6 months, where my mom died, and then my grandma died, and then the guy that I thought I was going to marry broke up with me in front of my dad at Coney Island. Then he got hired at Fox like 3 days later, and people are like, "How are you like able to make people laugh and stuff with all that stuff going on?" I'm like, "It's reversed. I was able to go through that stuff because I was making people laugh and because I was laughing, because that was an insane 6 months. And honestly, the least helpful things that anybody ever told me were the things you're supposed to say.
Yep.
Like, oh, like, she's in a better place. Or like, and it's like, I'm not even religious. And it's like, first of all, it's like, I'm very agnostic. I don't know where she is. Like,
Yeah.
but people just being like, that sucks. Like, I had a friend say to me after the dog, like, and then my dog died a little bit after that. Somebody commented on my Facebook being like, why does everything you love die? And I
Oh
laughed.
God.
I was like, you're like, because how are you? I'm like, not good, bro. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not good. And what made it so much worse for me was seeing people who are my friends or family that I've known forever, be nervous around me that they were going to say the wrong thing. Because it's like, now I feel like not only am I devastated, but I'm also isolated because everyone's so scared of saying the wrong thing around me that they don't even really want to talk to me at all.
Yeah. There's a new book that I was thinking about actually when I was reading your book that just came out, and it's these parents who lost both their kids in like a horrific car accident, and they were talking about how everyone's like, there are no words, there are no words, and they were like, no, actually there are words, and we do want to hear our kids' names, and we do want to hear like anecdotes about them. And I can't remember the name of the book, but it's something like there are words, or there
That's
finding the
great.
words or something, but it's all about this weird relationship to grief that we have in our culture and how it's so misunderstood and the way that people handle it's a lot of what you were talking about, but I think it was like if they took that chapter and turned it into an entire book.
Yeah, it's like my mom is a memory at this point. So it's like memories are all that I have. So I love when people will share stories about her or ask questions about her. And I just wish they wouldn't be like, oh, like, I'm so sorry to say this, but like, you look like your mom, or I'm like, what, why are you sorry? It's like as if their comment just made it occur to me that my mom was dead, like
Right.
I already knew that my mom was dead. And going back to the safe spaces thing, like Mother's Day, like that, I literally fled. I went away with some friends because I was like, I just need to get out of here the first Mother's Day. But I still was all this shit was all over Instagram. And I reposted this on my Instagram actually for Mother's Day this year because I write about it in the book, where the second Mother's Day that without my mom, I posted a picture of my laundry basket with a bottle of Tide, and I wrote, "My mom's dead, gonna do some laundry."
Yeah.
And I laughed and I like felt better because I just like broke up the feed. And it was supposed to be blunt. It was supposed to be harsh because it's like, and I'm also not the only one going through that. But of course I had some people being like, that's, I even got emails about it. Like, that's not appropriate. That's not sensitive. Why do you call your dead mom and she's passed on? I'm like, you're policing my grief over losing somebody whose body I came out of, but you don't even know her or me. So how are you seeing yourself as being compassionate? Like, I like to be able to talk about it this way. I find this healing. So you have to allow me to do that. And I mean, I was on TV on Mother's Day this year and everybody was giving the shout out to their mom. And I didn't have, I just said, hey, my mom's dead. And I remember so one of the hosts of the segment was like, oh, and I know it's a sensitive thing. So some people it's sensitive. And I was like, okay, I know you said it's sensitive. I appreciate that. But also like my mom's dead, just everyone out there who doesn't have a mom who's watching, like it's almost over. And I just like to laugh at all the advertising every year. Like my pet insurance company sent me an email like, your mom just called, and I laugh for a whole day thinking about like my mom found a way to communicate with the living, and like she chose my pet insurance to call them, and like that kind of stuff is helpful. And people get so scared. They do. I mean,
Yeah.
when people always ask me sometimes now, like I've had this multiple times because my mom died, it'll be 9 years in November. So, and that was, she was young and I was young. And so I was kind of one of the first ones to go through it in my sort of circle to,
Yeah.
other than grandparents, like have, a parent die or someone close to you. And people will ask me, oh, like so and so my friend, their mom died. Like, what should I say to them in a text message? And like, they're asking me to draft it. I'm like, I don't know this person. Like, I don't know this person. Like, you're already doing it wrong. Like, you just say to them what you want to say to them. They're the same person. They're going through something horrible. You just acknowledge that it sucks and be like, this sucks. And like, there is nothing you can say that can make them feel better, but just at least treat them normal. Don't feel like you have like these perfect words. And I really think sharing, I always recommend like, share if you have a favorite memory, something like that is what I always recommend actually. But it's like, there's no magic text message that I'm going to be able to draft and that you're going to be able to copy and paste and send to this person that I've never met.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard, and I understand people's awkwardness around the subject because they're it comes, I think, from a place of sensitivity where they're just like, "Oh, I can imagine myself in that position, and I don't know what I would say to even myself in that position." I think there isn't much guidance, and it's so heavy, and then there are some people who just kind of wanna stay away from that kind of heaviness in general, almost like it's a cold that you can catch, you know? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't wanna hear it, I wanna float above this. Just,
Yeah.
tell me when something good's going on in your life. I don't wanna
Right.
catch your, like, bad your
Yeah,
bad
I wrote
luck.
about this in the book too. I wrote about this in the book too, where a little while after she died, my sister and I talked about how long will it be before we know that when somebody texts us, how are you? They mean, how are you? And not, how are you?
Yeah, exactly.
Because because you don't want to get it wrong, right?
Right.
If they're like, how are you? And you're like, great, like they meant in the dead mom way that you look an asshole. But like if they were like, how are you? As in like, should we get lunch? And you're like, well, I don't know, it's really tough. They're gonna be like, wow, like you're exhausting. I can't keep you in my life. Because you don't know. I mean, it's all these little things that you don't think about.
Yeah,
But we were like, when does how are you mean how are you? And
I loved
I mean,
that
I was just
chapter.
yeah, I was like, I write about this too in that chapter. I was woefully unprepared for just how it is to like watch someone die because people don't talk about it. So I really kind of thought that towards the end, I was going to have all these meaningful conversations with, my mom, and she was going to give me these pearls of wisdom that I'd carry with me for everywhere. And the reality, that like she was like, I'm thirsty. Can you give me an ice chips? Because she was dying. Like
Yeah, I know.
she didn't feel good.
That was like
Like,
trigger alert. I remember my friend Henny when he passed away. I was there the whole time and till he died basically, and I was like, God, they really just don't do this justice in the movies at all. Because I thought the
they
same thing, like,
don't.
he was my mentor and he was from Egypt, and I thought we'd have these deep conversations about life, and exactly the same, just, like, give me ice chips, and then at the end, he had, like, a CPAC on, and he was, like, begging to have it be taken off, and it was, like, all of it was so horrific, and then at one
Yeah.
point, I was with his son, and they come in and he's literally dying. Had given him the morphine to like ease him into the death. And they're like, we have to move him and move rooms. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? And we're standing in an elevator with Henny who's dying, and I just start dying laughing. I was like,
Yeah.
this is so fucking beyond anything ridiculous. This man is dying and
Literally
you
mid
guys need a
dying.
bed? Like what?
Yeah.
What is happening? It
Yeah.
was crazy, and I was thinking
That's
about just how insanely wrong we have it in terms of your book does a good job of illustrating those moments where you're like, I think it's gonna be all flowery and like this Hallmark movie, and it's just actually horrific.
and the lighting. I write about this, like the lighting options in a hospital are either off or have I always been this ugly?
Yeah,
And like it smells, and it's like
and all the
there's like the only
beeping.
like there's no music. It's like there's beeping,
Yeah,
and like sometimes the beeping means that like someone's keeping alive machine is losing, and there's like people like
yeah,
when my mom was in the ICU, you come in and it's like, where that person go? That person died. And it's like it's presented as being so beautiful, and it's not. And so I actually felt like I was doing it wrong.
yeah,
Like I felt as she was dying, like I have to get these conversations out of her because that's what's supposed to happen, and I'm going to regret it forever. And like I'm doing it wrong. And it's like, no, there's no way of doing it right. And that's actually everyone I've talked to, just like just now, that's watched somebody die and been in the hospital for the end of someone's life. It's it's ugly, and
it's so
it's
ugly.
weird, and you'll find yourself laughing at the weirdest shit because you're crying so much, and like your brain needs that. Your
Yeah.
brain needs to laugh at something. I mean, the night after my mom died, the same night she died, we were all sharing a hotel room by the hospital. It was like me, my dad, my boyfriend at the time, my brother, and my sister, and we were watching Forensic Files, and it was, I don't know, like 3 in the morning at this point, and there was, the narrator said something like the house burned to the ground with everyone inside it, and there was like a beat. He was like, there were no survivors. My sister and I laughed so hard because we were like, duh, there's no survivors. Like, who edited this? And we
Yeah.
were howling laughing for like 3 hours just because we've been crying for like 3 days.
Yeah.
So was it funny that this family burned to death? No, it wasn't funny. But it was like, it's so crazy what happens to your brain. And nobody talks about how also, like families, it's like everyone's going to deal with it differently. You're going to fight. Because also my dad's like, stop it. Everyone's so emotionally charged and they deal with it in a very different way. And it's one of the ugliest things you can go through, but it's fascinating what happens to the human mind in terms of grief. But I wanted to be really raw in that chapter too, to be like, no, this is really ugly, and it's there's no way to do it wrong, and it's not going to be beautiful, and you're not going to probably have this, she's been waiting to tell you this secret where the secret treasure is buried, or like these pearls of wisdom. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, it's yucky.
It's so yucky. I just remember, like, one night, it was just, like, he was begging to get the mask off and had been going through dialysis, and it was just the end, and he was just, suffering, basically, and he and his son got into, like, basically, like, a fist fight. It was just, I was like, "What is happening
Yeah.
right now? This is not the shit you see in movies." It's like everyone's gathered around, and that
No,
sometimes
it's
does
not.
happen. People are gathered around and they're singing songs and it's fine, but there's a lot of instances where that's not the case. Yeah,
No,
people
it
are
was not
not
the case.
prepared for that kind of, they're kind of thrown into the deep end, I feel, when that really, when death knocks on your door like that.
Yeah. I remember my mom died. She died a week to the day after my 26th birthday. And it was so important to my dad. Like, we've always sang happy birthday to you every year. Like, they've done it on FaceTime, whatever. Like, it's not going to change now. So he got like, it was like this, he got a cupcake and he put a bunch of coffee stirs in it. And like, they sang to me in the hospital room. I was like, this is the most depressing shit ever. But I just started laughing so hard because I was like, this is fucking like, what are we doing this for, But I
Yeah.
mean, again, you mentioned laughter, I mentioned laughter, and that's why I can't, people like you. I assure you that your mom dying isn't funny. It's like, no, that's why you need to find ways to laugh. It's not that, yeah, no, it's like, you want to hear a funny joke? My mom died. Like, nobody fucking thinks that.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking about that your book was really represents to me is just how American free speech and comedy are. This stand-up comedy is such an American art form, and it's so connected to free speech. It couldn't exist anywhere else. They're just so unique to this country. And it makes me proud that we're able to laugh about these dark, horrific things and make jokes. I had a friend who is a stand-up comedian, and while her father was dying, she was kind of tweeting her way through it and then ended up writing a great book, Laurie Kilmartin, Dead People Suck, where and people were getting mad at her. They're like, "Oh, this isn't very, appropriate," and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, this is how I'm handling this. And her book is filled with a lot of really funny and important information about what to do when somebody dies that you're not even thinking about. And it's like, here's what to do, and here's what you need to know, and make sure you have this. It's so informative, but also hilarious. And people were trying
Yeah.
to tone police her. I was like, leave this lady alone. This is how she's coping with this.
Yeah, and also she's more upset about it than you are.
Yeah.
Like, you don't even know this person. That's what drives me absolutely crazy. I found it, the best thing in the wake of, writing this book has been people, reaching out to me and saying they loved it or they found it helpful or it made them realize that they're not crazy. Because a lot more, I mean, it's just a human thing. And I think usually the people who are upset about these things are the people who haven't gone through it yet. or they haven't gone through something like that. So they're like not mad at me for calling my mom my dead mom. They're just mad that they had to think about dead moms for a
Right.
second.
Right.
And it's like, just please, if that's what it is, then just say that, just be like, yeah, ooch, I don't like to think about my mom dying. So much better than like, don't say that, the way you're handling your own grief, that's wrong. Cause you're just a jerk. Like, you're seriously just such a jerk. And for me, as that's my whole chapter. And the last chapter is called, comedy is my religion,
Yeah. I love
because
that.
I don't have a religion. I would like to have a religion. I was raised very Catholic, and
Yeah.
completely not that, fell away from that. But it provides a lot of the same things, like healing physically, even, the chemicals that get released in your brain can be healing, like good for your immunity physically, emotionally healing. It can provide meaning to otherwise completely traumatic experiences. I mean, all the stuff that I went through, I was able to also provide meaning to me by, writing this book and creating from it. Like, the things that were destroying me, I took those and created from it. So it provides meaning like religion does. I think what it's if you think about it, comedy, it's like a worship service in a sense, because it's somebody there gathered to, see someone talk about life. And what's different is, obviously, there's no promise of eternal life with a joke. But what's also different is, there's really, it's missing a, standard of forgiveness that's reasonable. I mean, I'm not any religious anymore, but was for long enough to know, like, Leviticus, right? Like, the one of the least chill books in the Bible. And I write about this in the book, about how the standard in Leviticus for, it's an eye for an eye. So if you do
Mhm.
something wrong, it's an eye for an eye. And nowadays, if you think about it, we're actually stricter with jokes than they are about transgressions in Leviticus, because I guarantee you, no matter how much of, one of these people you are that's like offended by everything, you cannot tell me honestly that the worst thing you've ever been through is hearing a joke that upset you. But there's some people who might say that having told the wrong joke was pretty high up there, or if not the worst thing they went through. So that means that we're really treating comedy with a stricter standard of transgression than Leviticus,
Yeah.
which I feel like that means we're probably doing something wrong.
Yeah, that's always a weird thing to me too, when you read a lot about, like, some of these people who do horrific things, like pedophiles and all of these, and they get tossed in the rubber room, or they're, like, in jail for not a very long time, and I
Yeah.
feel like the offense that people have for a joke that they don't like should be saved for those kinds of people, like that
Yeah.
level of aggression and offense. It just seems very misplaced to me, and I'm not sure. That's like the part that I haven't really been able to dissect. I don't, because I think it's so systemic. I don't understand why, what that weird dichotomy is, where there's people who are, that outrage is just so misplaced. I don't really, and sometimes it's in the right place, but when it comes to jokes, it just feels disproportionate to what's actually going on, and I can't really figure out what that, rage is about towards comedy and comedians and jokes.
Yeah, I
What's your
think
theory?
yeah, I have a few theories. I think one thing is that some of these people, the anger is actually about something else. I mean, maybe that you're not where you want to be in your life. So the closest that you can come to it is maybe bringing down someone else who is more successful than you are. I also think that social media is a huge part of it, because for a few different reasons. I mean, there's research in the book that talks about how there's a psychiatrist, his name's like something Leary, who talks about how it's the sociometer theory, where there's no such thing as self-esteem. It's really how we feel about ourselves is how we feel other people feel about us. So there was a piece in I think it was the Atlantic, that was discussing how social media is kind of a public sociometer. So that's like a double whammy, because we want to have, you know seem popular and have a lot of followers, or have tweets or posts do well, not only so we can feel validated, but also so others can see how much other people are, validate us and think we're great. But the problem is, there's a few different studies that show that on Twitter and Facebook, using this sort of moral, emotional language, like the grandstanding, that actually increases engagement or the popularity of posts. And that's really interesting to me because you have to notice that's so distinct from real life, right?
Right.
Like if you had a friend that, constantly was just like talking about this, like, oh, and this is problematic and this is no, like, and that's all they ever said, and they just went really extreme with it all the time, like you wouldn't invite them to brunch anymore. You'd be like, this person's obnoxious. But on social media, that's actually rewarded. And I think also it ignores um, context. I think we're complex creatures. Nobody can be summed up if one little tweet or one little joke doesn't tell you everything you need to know about a person. And also just how easy it is to pile on. I mean, if someone like does a bad tweet, then all you have to do is quote tweet it and go, wow. Or
Yeah.
like quote tweet like quote tweet someone else who said this was bad and be like, this. Like you don't have to actually face that person in the eye when they get fired. You don't have to like get up off the toilet. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And so it's so easy, and you're not really having to actually face with the consequences. So it rewards all of the least healthy behaviors. So it's not communication at a certain point. It actually discourages nuance. It discourages being well reasoned because metrics, those posts don't do as well. And it makes it very easy to ignore the person's intent or, the person's humanity, actually. So
Mhm.
I think that definitely has a lot to do with it. It's so easy to just gain social points for yourself.
Yeah. That's all good points. I remember too, you reminded me of this study, and I wish I had saved it or I could find it again, but it was an article or a study I was reading about how the misplaced outrage is actually changing our brain. They think it's changing the reason that we have outrage, because outrage used to be something that would inspire action. So if you get outraged, you act and you move actually off the couch or you do something, and now it's outrage with no action, and they think it's actually changing the way our brains are wired, which is
Yeah,
crazy.
I mean, I could honestly believe that. I think it works the same way with apologies. I think that we're so oversaturated with apologies that they don't, I mean, people apologize because they feel, and by that I mean like public figures, companies, something like that,
The
because they feel
notes
like they have
apology.
to. Yeah, they like have to. So
I just love
that's
that they're drafted in like a note. It's like it so minimizes what an apology should be, and it's just like this notes at draft that they
Yeah,
post
and
on
it
their
follows the
Twitter.
same format every single time. Like, I was ignorant, but ignorance is inexcusable. It's not an excuse. I deeply regret hurting a blank community,
Yeah,
and I promise to do the work.
it's like a
It's
Mad
like the
Libs.
same exact thing.
Mhm.
So it's like we've created these rules that nobody actually really follows because these people aren't really sorry. They're just having a PR person telling them that they need to do this. And it also makes it really a lot more difficult for people who actually do want to apologize because we're just so oversaturated with it. The same thing with, outrage and these words that people use like racist, sexist, transphobic. It's just oversaturated. So if someone's like actually sorry, people are like, yeah, whatever. I've heard I'm sorry from 10,000 people in the past year.
Yeah. I loved your chapter too that was talking about like erasing everything.
Mhm.
That is such an important point of how if you're erasing these jokes that we found offensive and kind of acting like these things never happened, you can't ever really learn what the humor was like at that time or why it may be inappropriate or see the progress that we've actually made because you've just erased any of the progress that we've made. But it's also there's something very ISIS-y about it.
Yeah,
There's something very, like, burn down anything that we don't believe happened or, like, prior to our belief system. There's just something very unsettling about that whole making things disappear, especially in this digital age.
totally. I mean, as I was writing that chapter, I mean, one of the examples I used was like the yellow face episode, like that they called it like yeah, that's what they called it. They said like Yellowface and How I Met Your Mother. It was this big controversy, And at the time, some people were like, "Oh, this is overblown." Some people had the opinion of, "No, this is bad. This is yellow face." And then, but it got erased. And then, so someone was writing about it later, and they actually got it wrong of which character was dressed like that, because there's really
Yep.
no way to watch it. And you're
Right.
really just, it's all going to be secondhand. And honestly, it's kind of, and the person who was writing about it was making the point that you're letting people off the hook for past behavior by just erasing it rather than actually being able to have a conversation about it. And like, she got it wrong because it actually wasn't, you couldn't really see it anymore. um and like, I had, had to do like additional research, and it was actually my editor that pointed it out to me. I was like, I didn't know that, because I didn't really watch. I mean, I've seen some of it, but I'm not, like, a fan. And honestly, it's always better to have more information than less, right? It's because, like you said, like, how did we get here? You can follow. We went through this and this was okay, and then, and now it's not. And the only reason you wouldn't want to have all the information you could have is because you were trying to delude either yourself or other people. It's like the same reason if someone's life is a disaster, and they're like, I'm just gonna go, get fucked up. I'm gonna go black out. It doesn't mean their life is not a disaster. It means that they're like blacking that out or whatever, and like being like, I don't want to feel that, I don't want to think that, I want to pretend that's not there. That's what the equivalent of this is, because that past still happened and still played a role in where we are today, no matter what it is. Pretending that it didn't happen is just removing the opportunity for conversation, and just it's a mass delusion.
Yeah, and I think again, more of an example of intent and context mattering. You talk
Mm-hmm.
about, like, even with, I think, Tina Fey was kind of on board and saying intent doesn't matter, or whatever that anecdote was that you shared about her. And it's so disturbing to me when I see people in the industry, and this is her show and she can do whatever she wants and feel however she wants about it. So I'm not going to take that away from her. But it does seem like the point of some of these episodes was to make fun of things like blackface, or to
Yeah.
point out things like blatant racism. And instead, you're just removing it completely. And I don't know, that just this is like the modern kind of burning of art in this way, which if I find just so unsettling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she said intent is not a free pass, which I don't think anybody says that it is,
Yeah, no one
but
was
you're,
saying that.
no, but so that was like kind of a straw man, but it's also like, you did this and this is out there and this happened, and just erasing it is, it changes the whole story. Then 30 Rock is a show where they never did, blackface, as again, as they were making fun of that. It's the same with It's Always Sunny, which is one of my favorite shows, and Caitlin Olsen is like
A
my
genius.
hero. I think I think she's so brilliant. She's so funny. She's like
She
one of the
is.
funniest, if not the funniest comedic actress, definitely, who's on TV right now. And she did like these characters where she was like Martina Martinez, and it was like a streetwise Puerto Rican, and it was just so over the top. And there was like another one, Taiwan Type, is so over the top, and she thinks she's so funny, like she's delusional. She thinks she's gonna be an actress, but she's obviously like an alcoholic sociopath who set her college roommate on fire. So this is not like a role model character. But even in the episode, Charlie Kelly, who is the, illiterate glue sniffing janitor, is like, that's racist. So like the whole point being like, even this guy who sniffs glue and is, like, eats cat food, realizes that these, overly, these racist caricatures do not equal comedy. And it was making that point, and those episodes just like disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah, it's making fun of those exact racist caricatures, and it doesn't matter. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Again, it's like, you can't have every character in something be like a good person, and then like bad characters in the like movies or shows are going to do bad things. And like the whole thing about It's Always Sunny is that like
They're
they're
all
this group of
garbage.
horrible
Yeah,
people.
they're all
Like,
garbage. I
think
was
of all
actually
some of the other
going
things they've done.
I
Like, they've done
actually
so many
they're
things.
so bad. I was actually thinking, I was laughing that you love that show, because I too love that show, but I was like, I wonder if this is something people just gravitate to when they're going through, like, traumatic experiences, because I had an ectopic pregnancy in, like, 2019, and it was, like, the whole process was, it was just bad all around, and sad and traumatic, and I was just addictively watching It's Always Sunny, and my husband was like he wasn't my husband at the time, but he is now, but he was like, "Are you sure this is a show you should be watching? Like, these people are all such pieces of shit." I'm like, "No, it's making me feel better weirdly. I don't know why."
Yeah,
I
because they are such pieces of shit. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, so you can't have a bad character do a bad thing to make a point about how that's bad. I mean, it goes back to the same thing as with stand up. It's like you have to be able to try to do these things. I mean, you the last thing you should be wanting to do is be making the consequences of like art that doesn't work so high because it stifles creativity. I mean, even like in therapy when I have a problem or something and I'm trying to solve this problem. Like my therapist and I will do like an exercise, like, okay, where you just like brainstorm and the rules, you're not allowed to judge the thing. You're like, okay, like list the solutions non-judgmentally, just list them all off. Don't worry about what that actually work or what I actually want to do that because of the way it like frees up your mind. And how would that be not allowed in art or discouraged in art? Especially in something like stand up again, where it's like sometimes it's off the cuff. A lot of times, like an off the cuff response to a heckler or an off the cuff joke. It's if you shut down that part of your brain, then it becomes impossible.
Yeah. Coming after the arts is sinister. That's where it feels so sinister to me. It's something that I don't we need it. It's like one of the things I always talk about. I look at the things that humanity does right. And when I'm standing at a concert or I know that feeling when I hear laughter, it's like relief. It's just
Yeah.
relief. That's especially as a stand-up comic. I used to get on stage and when I would get hit with that first wave of laughter, I was like, "Oh man, this is amazing." Because it
Oh, it
is
feels so good.
relief. People are like, thank you for saying that because I can't, or I feel it, or I observed it, or it's just feeling that common humanity. And to erode that and take that away from people is, I think, I don't know. I mean, I guess I try to not be so cynical, and it like I think it kind of pushes me into, like, bordering on conspiratorial, I'm like, "Why does this feel so sinister to me to be taking this away from people?" Because like you say in your entire book, and the premise of your whole book is that it is a necessary tool for surviving our humanity, like, the human experience.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's I write about this too about how backwards it seems to me that it's supposed to be this movement, in order to aid and be sensitive to and help like marginalized groups when historically, I mean, everything from, everyone from like Susan B. Anthony to Frederick Douglass to like the, gay rights movement, all these movements, all these leaders in these movements historically have been extremely pro, free speech, First Amendment, because they understand that that's what allows these movements to flourish and to be successful because, obviously, gay rights wasn't where it is now in the past, and it was because of this literature people were allowed to publish and that kind of thing. Those are the groups that actually need free speech the most, and I don't understand. I mean, all that history of all those different movements, and now all of a sudden it's gotten completely flipped, and I don't understand how people don't see that.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems sometimes when I it was nice to read your book because I've read a lot of kind of political books over the years that have been like Douglas Murray's, which is amazing, but it's like as you're reading it, it's just a like exhibit A, exhibit B, exhibit all the way through Z of just how insanely fucked we are. You're like,
Yeah,
how do we get out of this? It's just like, oh, and this guy was canceled because he did this very nothing thing, and
yeah.
this art institute had to apologize because they did this nothing thing, and it was just a long laundry list. And I appreciated that yours it really thread the needle nicely in terms of taking your own experience and taking some of the things that are happening culturally and being able to weave those together and say, here are some examples of this in the culture, but here's how this actual tool of comedy and free speech has helped me process some of these horrific things that have happened to me in my own life. And I don't think as someone who writes about very similar topics, I know how hard of a needle that is to thread. So I give you all of the accolades for doing so, because I don't think it's that easy. And it seems the nice thing, like in that it's in your tone of voice, it feels almost conversational and effortless. It's not, a work of academia, or it's like you're having
No.
a conversation with your buddy about this stuff.
Yeah, and I wanted, that's what I wanted. I wanted it to be easy to read, and I'm, again, this is a book for everyone. It's a book for humans, and I know that obviously, everybody has preconceived notions about people for very different things. But for example, the fact that, oh, I work at Fox News, and people don't realize like Fox News is actually like not a monolith. Like there's people here who have very different opinions than other people who are here. And also, even regardless of that, this is again not really a political book. There's one political chapter. It's literally called Sorry, but this one is about politics, and it hits both sides because I'm not a Democrat for sure, but I'm also not a Republican for sure. And it's about human shit, and that's why I've, I'm I want more and more people to read it, because I really think that if people did and people took this to heart, these could be things that could help everybody get along and kind of actually change the discourse. And I think it's also, I wanted it to be fun to read, and it is
Yeah.
funny. And even my husband enjoyed reading it. He's like, I get your hot takes all fucking day. He's like, I can't escape your takes like nonstop all day. And he's like, I still really like enjoyed it so much that I was sad when it was over. Even though so I'm really proud of it. I hate almost everything I've ever done. And this book is the thing I'm the most proud of ever doing.
I love that.
So thank you.
No, that's meaningful, and I think if you are putting something out there and you're hearing from people that they can relate to you, or that they're grateful, or that your chapter about your mom or your health, there's so many things that you have been through that, like you said in the beginning of this, connect you, and in your book, connect you to other people, that it is powerful. Just making somebody feel like they aren't alone, and giving them permission to laugh at the messed up moments in their life is so important. It just is. We all need to take ourselves less seriously, and be able to take the very serious things in life and laugh at them, even when it might feel inappropriate. It's like you said, like I'm the uncomfortable person that laughs when I'm uncomfortable.
Me
I
too.
just it's my gut reaction to a situation where I had to go to this. I didn't have to, but it was gifted to me. It was like a healing your aloneness workshop, which is as pathetic as it sounds. And by the like second day, I was in the circle, and they were all holding hands at the end of the group, and I was like doubled over with laughter, laughing so hard I
Yeah.
was shaking, but everyone thought I was crying. I was so uncomfortable, and then they realized I wasn't crying, and they threw my hands down, and they were just enraged that I was being
Oh my gosh.
so, I don't know. It's the thing that's always saved me, though. I mean, I relate to comedy as a religion. It is definitely mine. And I've said things on. I know that there are things that I've said on Dumpster Fire, 100% in 10 years are going to come back to haunt me. There's no way that you can get on TV or camera, or on even in your garage or whatever, and speak as much as you do and not make a misstep. You talk about the one that bothered you about Jimmy Kimmel and
Oh
yours.
yeah. Oh yeah. But that's the thing is I always do worry, or I don't need more, but it's like the amount of time that I'm talking in front of a camera, or, on a podcast or TV, wherever it may be, I'm gonna say something. But Greg told me, he was like, Gutfeld, he said to me, well, don't worry, Kat, because it's never going to be the thing that you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
And this is a great example of that, where, yeah, I accident, but that was social media too. I made a joke, and the show was live, and actually we've not been live since, and I wonder if that's my fault. But we were talking about, it was like in 2020 how Jimmy Kimmel was taking off time, and I remember reading the article, and it said like my whole family's healthy. So I remember I made a joke like off the cuff, because I was thinking about like you know, how, why are kids the only reason like you can take time off, you have kids. And I just given my cat heart medication before I left, so I had that fresh in my brain. I was like, you know, it's a lot harder to give like heart medicine to a like a feral cat. They have claws, like kids don't have claws. And I'm going on, and Greg's like, you remember that Jimmy Kimmel's son has like had like a serious heart issue or whatever. And I was like, obviously I did not, because otherwise I wouldn't have said that. But it was so awkward. I was like, oh, like sorry. And then I just like blacked out. I like disassociated in the commercial break. And then the next second that I had to speak, I was like, I did not know. I did not mean it that way. I'm so sorry if anybody, you know, thought I did and was hurt by that. And then I actually was like blacked out the rest of the show. Like I was crying in the commercial breaks. I was like disassociated because I was like, I'm fucked. I'm fucked. Like I'm probably fired. I'm fucked. And actually, I was fine. Everyone who saw the show very clearly could see that like I was fighting back tears the entire time. They could very clearly see that it was an accident. They could very clearly see that I didn't mean that. And then the next day, ironically, when I was taking my cat to the vet, someone had clipped it,
Yeah.
just the joke, and said, here she is, you know, like that I'm making fun of him, his kid. I'm making fun of his kid for having, you know. And then that's when it all started, where everybody was like, his sister told me to fuck off and die. Like people were like, you dumb bitch, go kill yourself. Like it went on for days, and I like couldn't get out of, it was hard to get out of bed. It was so bad, and I felt so bad. I mean, I had a cousin die as a baby from a heart issue. Like you don't have to have a cousin die as a baby from a heart issue to know that like that's not, you know, that a kid is doesn't, that it's not worse to have a sick cat than a sick baby. Like and I just didn't know. And it goes back to intention. And that's why I lead off my chapter in intention about that, because I'm like, if I truly had been like, fuck your kid because he has a heart problem, then I would have deserved all of that and more. But I didn't.
Yeah.
And I went through all of that, and then it got posted on like some Reddit thread again, like another year later. And then my Twitter again was like, fuck you, bitch. It's not a big, and I'm like, oh my God. So it's like never the thing that you think it's going to be. But honestly, and I write about this in my apology chapter, that was the thing where I apologized exactly the way I wanted to. I was like, I'm sorry, because I didn't want anyone to watch that and think that I didn't know and think that I was making fun of that. So I was like, I wanted to, they also say like when you apologize when you fuck up, I think you don't say, but here's my explanation. Like if you fuck up, you just say like, I was wrong, full stop, I'm sorry. But when it comes to jokes, I think it's different. I think you need to make it clear I was making a joke, I didn't know. And I really felt bad. So I was like, sorry about that.
Yeah.
And people have asked me like, do you regret apologizing? Because people came after you anyway. And I'm like, no, because I didn't apologize because I wanted people to not be mad.
Yeah.
I genuinely apologized because I wanted people to understand that I didn't feel that way, and I wasn't minimizing that, and that's not what I meant to be saying. So I feel like if you don't apologize because of the mob, that's another way of sort of like letting them rule what you say and don't say. But yeah, I mean, I think same thing with me. I mean, I had a podcast at Barstool back in like 2016, and it was like some of the stuff I've said on there, I'm like, that can come back and blah, 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 blah. And like people come, but it's also like, I don't think I'd apologize for any of that stuff, because it was like joking around. I was like sitting there joking around, shooting the shit, sometimes drinking beers with people, hanging out. And, you know, there's nobody in the world that's never said something where it's like, if it was broadcast to the world, people would be upset.
Yeah.
It's just that not everybody's broadcast to the world or to the country or to wherever it may be. And I think it's just really important to apologize if you're sorry, but not apologize if you're not sorry, because I think about the same thing sometimes, but I'm also like, I've exposed myself ahead of time on so many things. I think you have too. You don't pretend that you don't have shit in your past, and neither do I. Like, I'm this fucked up person, and I'm not your hero. Like, I'm not a role model, but I've been through a lot, and here's what I've learned, and I'm figuring things out, and here's what I see, and I think that can be helpful too. It's like I'm never like, oh, I'm this angel, I'm this bastion of moral virtue who's never made a mistake, which is why I even rehashed that controversy in the book.
Yeah.
Like it's quieted down. I'm like, I'm going to remind everybody that I did this and how I went through this, because I think it's important in making this point.
Has it been hard to talk about these traumatic things over and over again and doing the book, like publicity for the book, or did writing it really help you heal it enough to get you to the point where this isn't bad?
You know what's the most fucked up thing is that the hardest part has been promoting it and like being like, buy my book. Like
Yeah.
I want to shoot myself in the face. Like
Yeah.
I hate like every post that I've done on social media. It's like my friend Keith, who was the flower girl at my wedding, my best friend who helped me clean my intestine in chapter 5. He's like, and he's also like my manager, and he's like, you have to, you know, You have to. That's been harder for me than actually talking about some of this stuff because, um, especially when you talk about when I'm thinking about the shit bag, I didn't tell anybody. And the reason I didn't tell anybody was because I didn't want people to get all weird. I mean, that's why the chapter, I get into like all these people who were dying of cancer we didn't know they had, like Norm Macdonald, like Chadwick Boseman. Like we had no idea they had cancer because they didn't want people to treat them weird. And obviously I didn't die, but I did have an intestine hanging out of my body. And if I was going to tell people that, then I'm just signing up for an arduous conversation.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, are you okay? Like, no,
Yeah.
like I didn't want them to treat me weird because I felt weird enough. I mean, I felt like a science experiment. But then obviously the reversal, the fact that I had complications or blood was just gushing out of my ass like so bad that I needed a transfusion was on January 6th. That particularly, obviously, like January 6th comes up a lot,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I, for years, like I think it was like maybe, like, was it at least, maybe probably, yeah, about full 2 years, whenever it would come up, I would be like, that would be what I'd be thinking about. And I would like watch like Adam Kissinger cry, or I'd like watch AOC like have a meltdown. It was the worst day of her life. And I'd be like, bro, I have you beat, like both of you. Like I had the worst January 6th. I was like gushing blood out of my ass in a bucket next to my friend Keith. It doesn't even compare. And like, so being able to say that after I didn't tell people for so long has been healing. And also I got past people being like, oh, that's gross. Like TMI, that's gross. I'm like, yeah, dude, like imagine living it.
Yeah.
So I kind of got past that. It's been that one I haven't really talked about a lot publicly. And my mom a little bit more I've talked about, but I have actually found it healing and refreshing to be able to talk about it because I decided ahead of time when I put this out there, like I'm putting this out there. I
So
mean,
you'll deal with it.
yeah, and I can be more emotional if anything. Like, wow, I went through all this and like I can't believe I went on TV with a poop tube on for 5 weeks.
I know,
Like
it's
that's
nuts.
remarkable. Like
Yeah.
it's cool to remember that.
Yeah.
Like if
And
I got
nobody
past
knew.
that, I could get through whatever.
Yeah,
Like,
no, that's crazy. That whole situation it sounds horrific, so I cannot imagine what it was like in real time. It
it was
just
unbelievable.
yeah, I
'Cause
can't
the whole time there was this element of like, are you fucking kidding me too?
yeah.
Like, I mean, I actually, with my therapist, I didn't want to look at it because it was so gross. So I would like for the first couple of days, I would make Cam empty the bag. But I was really anxious all the time. My therapist was like, if you are terrified of something on your own body, of course you're going to be anxious because you can't escape that. There's nothing you can do to escape that. So he made me like look at it and touch it for like a whole session. I was like, it was because I thought it was like I didn't even know what it looked like or what it was until I woke up with one. Well, actually a few days later when I actually looked at it, but like there's no like waste disposal valve. It's just your intestine hanging out of your body.
So crazy. How does it
Yeah.
not, like, get infected? I don't understand how it can just be outside of your body like that.
I don't either. I mean, there's a high risk of infection at all the time, right?
Yeah.
But you have to, like it's crazy. I mean, like you have the bag and you're supposed to change it every few days. So like when you are when you shower so you don't get it wet, you have to I put like a shower cap on it and then I put saran wrap and then I taped it around. I tape it up here and on the sides, and Keith was living with us on the time, and at the time he wouldn't do the one at the bottom. So he's like, that's too close to your vagina. I'm like, because he's gay, and I'm like, okay, I get that you're gay, but like how, that's really like there's nothing wrong with my vagina. Like it's making like that's the thing, that's too far for you. Like
That's
you're
the
cleaning my
thing.
intestines. So but then I was having problems with leaks and all that other stuff. And the toughest thing for me about that was it was like, I mean, I write a whole chapter about toxic positivity, but it goes into the same thing where everything I Googled about it was like, I have an ostomy and there's nothing wrong with, it's fine. Like I climbed Mount Everest and I'm like, I can't even get up off the couch without springing a leak. Like, this is crazy. And, I like, this is, and I get what people are trying to do, right? Like, okay, like you can still live a healthy life if you have to have one. And I get that. And eventually I got the equipment that fit better. And when I went home for Christmas, I was able to like go shopping and enjoy my life. And actually like I got more of the hang of it. But the fact that people just sort of like started there and wouldn't even be like, yeah, it's kind of gross, or even like joke about it or anything like that made me feel so much worse.
Yeah. And do people not get reversals? Do some people have to have that forever?
Some people do, yeah.
Wow.
But it depends. It's like if you have like a really chronic issue or if you have cancer or
Yeah.
something. But more commonly they are reversed. Mine was, only 5 weeks. Some people have had them for longer. And you can you can live with it. But it's like the fact that I felt like I had to censor myself from myself for being like, this is sucks. Like, and I couldn't find anything written about it that was honest about how bad it can be. And mine like it wasn't. I wasn't supposed to be having all those leaks, so it's like eventually it got better. But I couldn't find anyone saying this is really bad. Like, and
That
I
was
thought,
like me with the ectopic. I was like, no one's making
really?
jokes about how they have a jihad baby that's trying to blow them up. That's only me?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. You couldn't, and people are like, every this is the toxic positivity thing. It's like it's the whole like movement of body positivity, for example, has been around forever, and yet people still hate things about their bodies and their face, and like it's almost as if it's impossible. So then it makes it worse because not only do you have this insecurity, but all or many words stronger for that if we're talking about ectopic pregnancy or a shitbag, but like you also feel bad for not being able to feel good about it. And then so like you feel like you have to censor yourself from yourself. So then you're like feel bad and then you're also failing at something. So I found that being able to joke about anything just minimizes it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's I found your book very relatable. We are like sisters from another mister. I'm like, wow, we must have been born under the same like fucked up star.
I
Where
know.
it's good and bad, it's like I have had a very similar journey of just looking at where I was to where I am now. And I'm like, what the holy shit? It makes me emotional. And
Yeah.
but also just wow. just
Yeah.
you just it's just life and luck and, not things that we have very much control over. So I really related to your book and felt like a sisterhood with you when I read it. I've always felt that with you, but when I read your book, I was like, "Oh, now I know why I feel like we're kindred spirits." And I think
Yeah.
that it's so good that so many people are feeling the same way. They feel like that you're speaking to them. It just
Yeah, I always felt
means
that way with you too. I've always been like, people are like, do you know her? I'm like, well, like I met her once, but we've like sent so many messages back
yeah.
and forth. So I mean, definitely. I mean, I'm jealous that you get to live in Texas, quite honestly. But
It's definitely an adjustment, it's like I'm excited and it's amazing, but I've actually had some, like, health stuff going on, and I do not think Texas is the best state for like, I don't think you can get individual PPOs, and so I have an HMO, which I haven't had ever,
oh
and
yeah,
I'm like, "What the fuck? Is this how most people have to deal with their healthcare? Because this is insane." And so
yeah,
I'm being, humbled, and I'm having my butt kicked, and it's definitely, not the way I kind of envisioned my entry into Texas, but it's a learning experience and also hilarious, like,
Y-
I'm sure I'll find a way to make fun of it.
yeah, exactly. It's like you every tough thing you go through. It's like I said, it's a connection that you're building with other people, but it's an opportunity to create meaning, even if you don't fucking see it at the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I was like, "I'm gonna move to Texas and get back on stage, and I'm gonna be at the mothership every night," and it's like, cut to Bridget in debilitating stomach pain.
ah, fuck. Yeah.
And then I
Yep.
read your book, and I'm like, "Oh, shit."
Yeah, like, the day that I thought I was gonna get married, when my wedding was canceled because of the pandemic, was actually the day that the first time I woke up to realize my shit bag had exploded. Like,
No.
you never know. I mean, like, sometimes your life can change and things can happen, more quickly than you're able to keep up with accepting them.
Yeah,
So, you have to just do the best you can and laugh as much as you can. I mean, laughing and making people laugh is, like, easily my favorite thing about being alive.
me too. I agree. And writing.
Mhm.
What's your biggest defective character?
Oh, my, like, biggest defect of like,
It can be
myself?
however you interpret it. It can be what you're working on now, like the overarching theme in your life, something that comes up all the time, however you
I mean, definitely, like, I'm so anxious.
Mm.
I'm a very anxious person, and I don't know if it's, like, because I was raised Catholic or not. I don't know if that's what I'm very anxious. I always feel like I did something bad, even when I didn't, and also, like, I need, like, other people to validate me. like, tell me I'm good. Tell me I'm good. Like but at least I acknowledge that, which I don't know if that makes me any less annoying, but I'm always like, I always am nervous that like, I don't know what I'm doing or I'm doing the wrong thing or, you know, like this is all going to be over. So just like, I think I'm a very, very anxious person.
Which is funny because you seem not anxious. You know, it doesn't necessarily convey when you're on camera in particular. And out from your story, like even when you're talking about when you were grinding in LA and doing the morning like traffic reports and then going to your internship and then having your job at night waiting tables, or it was at the diner or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like you're a hustler, you know? So I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
you're like me and you just kind of keep hustling to try and outrun your anxiety.
It's exactly right. That's exactly right. There's nothing honestly that scares me more than the idea of like not trying or that I didn't try hard enough or that I didn't work hard enough. But I'm always just like I'm so nervous. So I mean I don't know what it's I'm always am I gonna be okay? So but I feel like that's definitely the thing that I need to like validate myself better and also just like chill out a little bit and like enjoy it and be like you're good.
Yeah. Do you what's your biggest asset?
My biggest asset, it's tough. I'm tough trying to put it into words. I think that I can make people like I think I'm like fair and like honest with who I am, and I can make other people feel comfortable because of that. I'm also like it's the way I've kind of rebranded my impulsivity, which I could have said is a flaw. But I think that I'm really good at, you know, being true to myself and I have a core set of beliefs and that I'm also good at communicating those in a way that's like fun and entertaining and funny for people to watch and it can make other people feel comfortable opening up because I'm more of an, you know, a very open person or generally pretty fucking open if you read the book.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, like I'm very, very open. And I think that's definitely, I mean, I would say that was probably it. I mean, my like as far as skills, my best is I'm probably the best at writing, I would say.
Mhm. And where can we find you and your book?
Yeah, okay, so I finally got a fucking website, like after my book was already out, which is www.therealcattimpf.com. Don't go to cattimpf.com. It's like a Malaysian porn site, unless that's what you want. Therealcattimpf.com. And you know, at Cattimpf, Twitter, Instagram, all those things. And I'm going to be soon announcing some more dates for my tour, but they're not ready yet. So
That's awesome. How's the tour going?
mhm. It's been great. I'm so excited. It's been awesome. It's been so much fun. I'm gonna have more like dates on my. It's all gonna be on my website soon, which is nice about having one of these website things.
Yeah.
It's all in one place.
And where can we
But
find your social media?
at Cattimpf, KATTIMPF.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's just so fun. I can't wait to see you in person and hang out and make jokes on television together again.
I agree. It's so good to see you. I look forward to a lifetime of friendship.
Yes, me too. We were born with the same weird energy.
Absolutely.
It's time for the weekly check-in with Bridget and cousin Maggie. All right. Well, I'm feeling better.
Yeah, makes a huge difference.
Jesus. I feel so bad for people with chronic pain because it really affects one's psyche in a way that is scary.
Yeah, it cannot be kind of quantified how important it is to feel good.
Health is wealth. That's what they say.
Chronic pain and just kind of chronic ailment.
Yeah.
Just sucks.
Yeah, chronic pain and yeah, just not good because it definitely, my sisters are like, are you depressed? I'm like, no, I'm just not feeling well.
Right.
I'm not depressed.
Right.
I have no energy. It's so life force draining.
You're like, it's making me feel depressed. But
I seriously, I you know, there's like people who get cancer and they are just so like warriors and upbeat. I'm like, I would be like,
on the bed. Yeah. I would be
I don't know if I
in
have that
bed
kind
with
of
the curtains
fight
drawn.
in me. I'd be like, goodbye,
Be
cruel
like,
world.
I let me waste away in my
It's
sick
just
bed.
like, I don't. I don't know if I have that in me. I get like a ulcer and I'm like ready to I don't know that I was joking with my sister too because she's like, "Oh, I'm like, well, I haven't been able to drink coffee." And she's like, "Well, I wouldn't want to live life if I hadn't had coffee in 3 weeks." And it is a little bit. I feel like the minute I started drinking coffee again, I felt like myself. Like, yep, there's still a substance that I'm addicted to.
Yeah. But you're like, I've given up so much. I'm not giving up my coffee.
No, but I do feel better, which is good. I had a great podcast today with Tim Urban, which is coming up. And we were talking about his book is so great. I love it. I'm sure a lot of people will hate it, but I loved the way that he frames everything. It's just so brilliantly done. This current moment in time. And we were just talking about digging our heels in tribally and how easy it is to just fall down into something that you believe or a position and not even realize that you're stuck in it. Like I came and moved here, and because you can't get you can get PPOs, but usually you have to work for a company or they're prohibitively expensive to get individual PPOs in Texas. And it's something about California that's better than Texas. Part of the reason that I might have been feeling not depressed, but just I was feeling so upset that initially upon arriving in Texas, I was confronted with something about Texas that absolutely sucks compared to California. And I didn't want to admit it. I was like, no, I can't admit this to myself or anyone because and I was talking to Tim about it today. I admitted it to him. And he's like, yeah, you get it in your head, like California bad and Texas better. And you just can't,
right.
like,
you can't see outside.
He's like, cognitive dissonance is not comfortable. And I was like, yeah, that's part of what I was sitting with. And just feeling like I had the same doctors for years when I was decades.
Yeah.
I'd been seeing my doctor in California since I was like in my 20s.
Wow. Yeah, you went back to her when you moved back to LA.
Yeah. So that was not fun either.
No, it's true. I mean, I'm still kind of in, it's going to take a while to settle into, like, you've got to find all the people, your dentist, your doctor, your hairdresser, your eyebrow lady, all of the stuff. And you're definitely outside your comfort zone. It's an uncomfortable feeling. You have to make new friends. You have to like go out there and be social and put yourself in situations that are new all the time because you don't just have your, restaurant that you love to go to. There's a lot of stuff that, it allows for exploring and new adventures and all that stuff, but it's definitely you're living outside your comfort zone until you create a new one.
Yeah, and I was in a very very well grooved comfort zone.
Right. And I mean, yeah, like a rut. Yes. I definitely was in a rut in LA and I definitely needed this push to get out of it. So
I just think too, as it's been a month, it was exactly a month this past weekend, which is not much time at all. But I'm so hard on myself. I'm like, why aren't I shooting dumpster fire? Even though I've been sick, a friend died. I have a baby and moved an entire household.
I know we're still not fully set up yet,
And I've just been very hard on myself. And it's not like I have tons of help doing this stuff. I'm not paying people. So we have to just do it. And I don't have a nanny or anything.
No, it's step by step, task by task.
Yeah, it's been nuts, honestly. But I think I feel like this week and we've had guests and we have more guests coming and
then more guests after that.
Yeah. And I'm leaving it's just nuts. It's life is totally and fully in session, which is great. And I'm not complaining at all. I have to say every time I see a headline come out of California where Gavin Newsom is saying something that would previously make my blood boil, and now I can view it probably the way that people outside of America view American politics, where they're like, ha ha ha.
Yeah, totally.
I don't have to be the subject of this.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely stuff I miss about LA. I loved my time there, but I'm also happy to be done. You know, like, I'm happy to be out of LA for a lot of reasons, but I'll still miss it. I still love it. It still holds a special place in my heart. I spent a significant chunk of my life there.
Yeah. I think we'll be back there a lot. I mean, I know we will because we have family there. So,
yeah.
But it does feel better to be, I don't know. I was driving home today from an appointment. One of the like freaking billions of doctor appointments I've had to go to on top of all this shit. And the clouds just looked so good, and it was like rolling hills and cows, and I was just so happy. And I know, again, I could get that in California if I moved outside of the city, but there's so many cool people moving here who already live here, and every day that I'm here, I've discover something new, or like someone else that I love is moving here. So
I know I still can't get over the friendliness. I love it. I love where we live. Like, I love where we landed. I think it's really awesome.
Yeah.
So stay tuned.
I just love having weather again, even though I know it's about to be. Somebody had this hilarious meme that I posted on Instagram, and it was like, attention, new arrivals. Texas is preheating. Tune in next week for another riveting episode that will change your life, help you get out of your own way, and solve all the world's problems. I want to thank our composer, Jared Elias, my co-producer and cousin, Maggie, and all of you out there listening. This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.